Welcome, everyone. John Taylor is joining me again today. I was just sharing with the group that many of John's webinars are on my frequently shared list. So if you have not been on our YouTube channel or you are watching this on our YouTube channel, but you haven't looked for all of his great content, I would encourage you to go back and do so. So what do you have for us today, John?
So we're going to talk about what data is in the context of relationships, why it matters, and how to gather good data and utilize feedback loops in your relationship to get clarity, safety, and progress. So I know that data, as applied to relationships, it like takes all the warm, fuzzy gooiness out of it and can sterilize it. Uh, I do not think that's the way to live in relationships going forward, but especially when betrayal is acute or discovery is acute, meaning we've recently arrived at this information. It's good to challenge how your brain wants to orient itself. So the majority of problems that I see with couples come from, I would sum it up as they are feeling and reacting and not thinking. And that is not me demoting feeling and reaction and gut feeling at all. I think it's more of a challenge to say, why not get your frontal lobe online as well? In dialectical behavior therapy, they talk about the wise mind, which is where the emotional mind and the logical mind meet and overlap. So this is I want to give a framework today to maybe help in early discovery and that acute distress, both for partners and their addicted loved one or cheating loved one, to kind of pull the brain and pull the perspective in the direction of some data, some frontal lobe, some good clear analysis, so that there's balance, so that there's access to context. So what is relationship data? So the relationship data, I would say, is the information that we use to assess and create our narrative about our relationship and the world. So data is inert, which means there's not good data or bad data. There is quality versus non-quality. But if you were to look at a spreadsheet of numbers, say that tracks safety metrics for a car that you're looking at, the numbers inherently do not say anything. Those are 10 integers that in different arrangements denote different quantities, but numbers don't themselves tell a story. The way that we organize the numbers and the way that we look at the numbers and the way we compare the numbers opens the door for us to make assessment, analysis, and to ascribe meaning to those numbers, which can be helpful, but the data points themselves are inert. And in a minute here, we're going to see why that's really, really important to depersonalize the data to a degree, because again, that acute stress that many of you know all too well is going to set off safety and alarm bells that will get your brain thinking only in one way. And we've talked about this a lot in my webinars in the past. So short-term focus, maybe the gains now that may be self-harming in the long run. That's all how our brain works in acute stress. So relationship data does not create imperatives. Relationship data creates landscapes, scenes, stories, information that we can start to pick through and decide what it means for us. Relationship data comes from the amalgamation of our words, attitudes, beliefs, past and current behaviors. So, I hear a lot of betrayed partners and their addicted counterparts saying things like, my partner said X, Y, Z, but I don't know if I should trust that. Or my partner is doing this. I don't know what that means. Again, when we're under a lot of stress, our brain does not want to do complexity. Complexity is not efficient. Complexity is not clean. Complexity doesn't give like a clear, uncontested path forward. So really, if we're going to gather good relationship data, we're going to pay attention to good relationship data. It's almost like those 3D wall art posters that I've never been able to see, but I hear that you kind of blur your vision and try to look 10 feet behind it and the image comes out. Relationship data works a lot in the same way. You have to take in a bigger picture and you have to fight the urge that your brain is going to have to make automatic connections. And it's not that those automatic connections are wrong, like automatic connections that all of a sudden make someone who has kept secrets from you only appear evil or malintentioned. That makes a lot of sense for someone who seeing someone that way who has hurt you. However, if you want a relationship with that person going forward, you have to find eventually some space in yourself that lets you separate from that narrative that this person, if left to their own devices, will hurt me. Otherwise, you know that you would not be wise to trust that person again. So relationship data um, for a time period comes from almost looking with a microscope, what is happening and what does it mean, and then eventually just kind of like laying all the data points up on the wall, standing back, blurring your vision, looking 10 feet behind it, and seeing what pops out. And that often comes out in a gut feeling that may be very difficult to explain or justify, but feels right nonetheless. And that, for me, what I've observed most often, that's the mechanism for when trust returns to the relationship. It's a gut feeling each of us make, largely influenced by tons of subconscious data processing. But in the end, it comes from that feel about the data set. So, why does relationship data matter? Like I just said, gut decisions are largely influenced by subconscious gathering and analysis of data. So there's no way around it. You can call it intuition. You can say that some people have good intuition, some people have bad intuition. Um, Maybe that exists to some degree. I also see a correlation between the willingness to look at all of the data and the desire to just have the data that fits the narrative that I most
Mhm.
want. So there's no way around the data that we're gathering influences the decisions that we make. The more we can accept the data that we're seeing, trying not to resist any of it, but allowing it to take in and know that there is some kind of like black box experience to that. I don't know why it necessarily comes together in this way, but I am reacting to things that I see, feel, hear, intuit, all of that. Um, it also matters because we make our narratives out of data. Now, narratives are a product of our pattern seeking brain. Our pattern seeking brain ascribes meaning to everything. So, human beings are a meaning making species. If you want to see this anthropologically, look at the myths that we've created over time. Look at the stories we've created over time. The fairy tales that eventually morphs into what we have as like a more scientific process. Like our brains want to make sense out of the world that we live in. We're highly prone to find patterns, and narrative, you could say, is maybe an evolutionary um, convenient little packet to carry around really complex data. So I don't know how this works with computers, but think of a really complex image. The ability to store really complex images and complex programs in a small physical location comes from more efficient ways of encoding and storing data. So think about it that way. Narrative is an efficient way of encoding and storing a lot of data for human beings. Narrative plots the course, largely plots the course for what we will and won't do in our relationships. So I see this all the time as a couples therapist in my office. And often some of our early tasks are making explicit the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories we tell each other about our relationship. Because what we what we tell ourselves largely plots what we think is possible. So, so for example, think about landing on the moon. Think about You see all sorts of stuff. It's kind of fun now. You see all sorts of stuff that 50 years ago was science fiction that now is coming to be like a personalized, high-powered computer that everybody carries in their pockets. Um, that is not the necessarily logical conclusion of this evolutionary tree that started with a narrative. What if we start seeing it, we start dreaming it, and all of a sudden the ability goes in that direction? Um, Data also matters because incongruous or inconsistent data makes people feel anxious, makes us feel in danger. So our brains love patterns, they love predictability, and that which we can't find a pattern or predictability in is going to make us feel anxious, uncertain. So we insert a narrative that is created to help us predict and clue into patterns that help us find safety. So for the longest time, I'll put my field in under the microscope here. For the longest time, we've had a narrative about personality disorders, about trauma, about certain presentations, and there are certain types of people or certain presentations that for the longest time we've said, oh, that's not treatable. You can't do a thing about that. And there are things like we see like borderline personality disorder, and I'd say even some narcissistic um, type presentations that the narrative around what can be done about that and how that can change is starting to shift. I think in the past, the amount of knowledge we have, you get these people in your office that are really emotionally labile and very, writ large, not very pro-social. That's a scary person to be around. So the narrative of this is untreatable, sorry, sir, sorry, madam, I will not be helping you. That narrative makes a pattern that I can start to rely on and predict that creates safety for me. Now, narrative does not equal truth, clearly. So, because we make our narratives out of data, and narratives are what we rely on to make these predictions, data and the way that data is managed in a relationship is super, super important. So that all setting the stage for how do we gather good data and make helpful feedback loops in a relationship. And again, the purpose of my webinars is things you can use from day one. So this isn't once I get sober, then I can do this. This isn't, once we decide to stay together. This is like from day one to create some safety for yourself and some help and some clarity for your relationship. The first thing to gather good data is you have to differentiate. So I forget who said it. I have it in some notes from a class I took a little while ago. Something about differentiation is uncoupling and depersonalizing, not seeing the other as historical family or historical threat. So when we talk about uncoupling and depersonalizing, we're not necessarily talking about physical distance, although if you're having a struggle with that, physical distance can help do some of that uncoupling. We're really talking about that often misused psychology trope that has nothing to do with me. So our family of origin, that has everything to do with me. Whether I'm a good person or a bad person, whether I'm safe or not, that has everything to do with me. Ultimately, your behavior and your choices have nothing to do with me. Even if it feels deeply personal, even if it hurts me, you decided to do what you did. You decide to do what you do now because that's what you're deciding, as far as I'm concerned, as far as it matters to me. So, differentiation is key in gathering good data because as long as you have a personal stake, this is where I forget what I was watching the other day, but it was a political type comedy. And you have this lobbyist that is talking to this politician and trying to sway them. And the lobbyist said, hey, we paid good money for studies to show that this is not true. Like, that is not depersonalized data. So when you are on the like addiction or the betrayer side of this, when you start seeing as the status of this relationship or the way that this relationship continues is absolutely essential, I can only accept one outcome. You are going to see and you are going to give very skewed data. On the other side, if you've been betrayed, if secrets have been kept, and it's either, this person is the devil and they need to leave me alone, or it's I have to be with this person. I can't think of any other way to do this, or, despite everything that's happened, I still love them and I want to be together, all of which are, perfectly reasonable things to think and feel. If you have a personal dog in the fight for the data that's in front of you, you're going to have a hard time seeing it clearly or even gathering all of the data subset. So really working on that differentiation. And I'd even look at it this way: the lens that you put on that says this is deeply personal to me and important to me, that's one way to gather some data. Taking that lens off and saying, what does this tell me about who you are and what you want and what's happening, is another really important way to gather data. So the more awareness we have of our lenses and our biases and our motivations, the more we can switch those lenses. And it's like those sculptures that when you look at it from one angle, it looks like a bunch of wavy lines. You turn to another angle, and this word comes into focus. So the more angles we can gather data from, the more hats we can put on, the more lenses we can be aware that we're using, the more an image starts to emerge. Um, so uh, I would also say on that note, it's very natural to feel defensive or afraid when we get data that we don't like. So fear begats control, defensiveness begats distance. So part of that mantra from earlier, there's no good data or bad data, it's just information, is really, really important in getting good data. So you may see something that really scares you, and you might need to just tell yourself, this does not mean good or bad. This is not inherently good or bad. It just is. This is just what I'm seeing right now. Even I've heard a lot of people on both sides of this equation, addicts and their partners, say, I'm not sure what this means right now. All I know is that it's right here. Um, I think it's a 12-step mantra. More will be revealed is also a really important thing to apply here. Um, Another part of gathering good data and good feedback loops is you cannot rely on what I call the check is in the mail phenomenon. So the check is in the mail is a synonymous with I'll tell you what you want to hear, but I have not taken the steps to make that a reality yet. So both on the data giver side, a lot of addicts that I work with, they over focus on what they say. I told my partner I would never do this again. I told my partner this is not an issue for me. I told my partner I'm working a program and I'm not defensive. Um, what we tell largely carries a lot less weight than what we do or what we show. So um, pay attention to what is done. I think outcome and action largely uncovers intent. Um, so both if you want to give good data to your partner about what's changing for you, say less. I might even say sometimes shut up altogether, put your head down, work your program, learn how to regulate your emotions, be honest, let the story speak for itself. Let people make up their own mind about you. Don't anxiously sway it. Um, from the side of the betrayed partner gathering data, I see seemingly endless conversations rehashing this or rehashing that because ultimately what my anxiety is telling me is I just need you to say the right thing. And I can see like literally endless interactions around this. But wait a minute, don't you really mean, or didn't you really, or won't you really? Um, versus, yes, what you say is this much of it. If we reverse engineer this, if ultimately I want a repentant partner that's not going to do that, what are the kinds of actions that a repentant partner takes? Well, they may get really vigilant about their defensiveness. They get honest. I think early in recovery, the commitment to not necessarily working a full disclosure, but the commitment to full honesty is really important. So relationally, what that means, if my partner is, I don't know, kind of spinning their wheels or taking their time and committing to a disclosure process. I think that's some behavioral data that doesn't comport very well with, hey, I really want to do whatever I need to make you feel safe. I think dragging the feet and finding excuses not to be involved in program or good therapy. So a lot of us and a lot of the couples I meet with who are dealing with betrayal, I would say a lot of them started their relationships ultimately in the check is in the mail phenomenon. They built a relationship based on potential, not what was happening. As we get further into that work and couples are getting more regulated and trust is starting to come back on the stage, like 80-90% of the time I'll hear couples say, you know, there were pieces of this relationship dynamic that I never really liked, but I just thought it would change.
Mm.
I thought my partner would be different. And that's that kind of like building a relationship based on the potential versus what it is right now. So, especially early in recovery, your intention and your promises mean very little. And I would say to both, like to both sides of the equation, intentions and promises mean very little. Your behavior today means a whole lot. So, focus on behavior today, pay attention to behavior today, be impeccable about your behavior today. If you want trust and stability and relationship repair to have a chance to come back in the picture in the future. The last thing I'd say about gathering good data is know thinking errors, KNOW, know what thinking errors are and how to confront them. So we're all prone to them. This is like one of the most fascinating parts of human behavior and human psychology to me. Distortion patterns are pretty universal, pretty recognizable. It's really interesting how our brains work because the biology from brain to brain is pretty similar, but the way that it gets put together and the way that it gets presented can be infinitely diverse. But this like thought distortion thing, denial, minimization, blame, those kind of things that you start to look at in early recovery. I would say both for the person who was betraying and their partner. Get familiar with those thought distortions in your past. Know your personal preferences for thought distortion because you cannot overcome your human biology and say, "Oh yeah. I know that people have distorted thinking, but not me." Yeah. I know that, we can interpret data incorrectly, but because I know that, I'm not going to do it. No, you're absolutely going to do it. So, knowing those predictable patterns of distortion, denial, I think are really helpful too in gathering good data because you can talk those through or you can iron those out. There's lots of good recovery tools for kind of confronting that built-in bias in us and really helping us see the whole data set. Now, just real quick, I want to talk about the benefits of dealing with data in a relationship. I think the biggest benefit is that we grow up, we mature. Complexity is not something that inherently we just can or can't do. Complexity is something we develop the ability to do the more we allow ourselves to come in contact with the complexity. And I can say this about 100% of the couples, the unit that comes into my office, they do have a lot of growing up to do. That is, I think, a non-negotiable part of the couple's recovery path is moving from that one person thinking into two-person thinking, which for 100% of the people that I've met in my office, that requires growth and change on both parts. So don't be afraid of the complexity. I was just talking to a couple yesterday that's tackling a very hot button project together around their house. And, they give this report and they said at the end of every day, we end up with a box that we know is going to be donated. And we end up with a little corner or a little area that is better off. And this person's mother had loaded their house with her keepsakes and her things she thought was important to them. So, of course, one of them is very attached to some of this stuff. And the other one is like, you can't get it out of my house fast enough. So there's a potential for a lot of fights and there's a potential for a lot of overwhelm, and they're running into disagreements and they're running into overwhelm. But I said we have very manageable goals, we have very manageable targets, and we can both say to each other, I'm overwhelmed and and I need to take a break. So um, as I was talking to them, they were noting just what was changing inside of them as they were starting to accept, I want this to happen on a timeline that my partner doesn't necessarily want or isn't necessarily ready for. So I have to hold myself back. And the other one saying, I know it's been unfair all of these years to have my parent taking up literal space in our house. So as hard as this might be for me, I really need to work at it and I need to sweat. That's growing up, that's maturing. And that's where I would say secure functioning relationships really spring out of. It's not about what one gives to the other, it's about the commitment both have to hold the reality of the relationship for what it is. Um, Again, not basing it on potential. So that's a look into relationship data, why it matters, how to gather good data, and ultimately what it gets us.
So I was thinking when you're talking about the different lenses, our mutual friend, Dr. Ken Adams, in teachings, he always talked about, there it's a prism and
Mm-hmm.
we're, looking through the different things. Because if you look through one side of it, you're going to see this. And if you look through the other side, you're going to see that. It's the same thing, but you're going to see it in a different way. And
Yeah.
so I think it is really important. I can't tell you, I'd probably say it's usually to partners, that's more data for you. That's more data
Yeah.
for you, because because it's easy to get caught in the this is happening to me, and it is, but it's also what are, I'm going to use his and her, what are his actions telling you? Like that's what it is. I love that you talked about it. It's not about the words. I say that all the time too. It's like, what are the actions? Because I hadn't thought about it of the check is in the mail, analogy, but I was like, yeah, that's true. It's like, I'm never going to do that again. Or like, I think lots of couples, even not with these issues, going on, perceive that, well, when we get together, all of this will change. Lots of addicts think when I get in a relationship, I'm going to quit using porn and acting out because now I'm going to be married and it's going to be easily accessible. And that doesn't happen. But,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of unrealistic expectations. And so I love that you're, talking about that. I love that couple. I mean, yeah, that's a challenge for both of them. One of them to slow it down, one of them to pick up the pace. But I hear
Mm-hmm.
instead of being here, they're working to get to, okay, we can both tolerate this, so that's growth.
Yeah, it's really stepping back from the wall, isn't it? And not just looking at what's going on with me, but like what is our whole system? What's the capacity? What are the assets that we have that allow us to move forward, and what are the assets we need to develop to really get over the finish line? It's pretty beautiful what they are doing for themselves for sure.
And that will serve them in all areas of their relationship. It isn't just about cleaning the house, like that's this complex work serves us not just in that relationship, in all of our relationships if we're willing to do that. And
Yeah.
I think the story I'm telling myself, I think that's really useful, and it's a way to approach things. Do have a question for you, because on the you were talking about the bias, and the thinking, the distortions. Like, do you find that there are like, if I have a bias or distortion in this area, it probably keeps showing up? Or is it people in general? Like, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Biases and filters are they're not situational, they're neurological patterns or preferences. So, for example, I have a family member who is a known embellisher. And when we were kids, it was like lying to get out of trouble. Um, this family member is largely reformed. Um, but you can see that preference, like this person's an entertainer, this person's a charming person, and you'll see that same distortion and embellishment come into stories, and it's like, I was there and it didn't happen that way, albeit his story is the one that I wish would have happened, like that would have been fun, or that's really funny. So like, yeah, I would say if it's happening in one area, it's likely to generalize into another, because I'll put it this way: addiction isn't like a dissociated personality, or trauma is not like a dissociated personality. It's a neurological overlay. So this is where I think in AA, when they talk about like once an addict, always an addict, I don't think that means necessarily like always beholden to the substance or the behavior. But I
Correct.
think it does mean like my mind is prone to work a very specific way. And I need to know what that is because, I may not, they talk about being a dry drunk. I may not do this around alcohol anymore, but I may do this around relationships. I may do this around work. I may like, so those distortions, I would say, are not episodic. They're more like well-worn paths, familiar friends, my favorite backdoor exit that I know how to take anywhere.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so we got some questions. The first one is I'm the betrayed, married for 15 years, 3 kids. D Day was 14 years ago. However, I did not get into recovery until 4 years ago, and neither did he. When I started putting up boundaries, things got bad. He would be moody, depressed, stonewalled, gaslight, full of shame all the time. 2 years ago, I had enough and asked him to leave as I couldn't live with an active addict any longer. It was painful for me. When he left, things got better. He was a nicer father to the kids. He seemed happier with life on a whole. He is helpful with the kids and house stuff. My question is, I still love him and miss him. However, maybe it's just not for him to be in a relationship with me. Is this his shame? Is it me? Are some addicts just not able to be happy while not having lots of women in their lives? I have my own life. However, I'm not yet ready to divorce, but I probably should. That's a lot. Thanks for asking that. That's a lot that you're
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, and I don't think that this is a really like rare occurrence or situation. So I'll put this in terms of secure functioning. Um, Love is really wonderful, and at the end of the day, I do think that love makes the world go round, but it's not sufficient to construct a relationship that works. So what I read into this is there's two parts to a relationship that works. There's what I call the meaty nut in the middle, the nutrient dense part. This is what's special. This is what I don't think I could get being with another person. This is why I want you. That's not the relationship. That's the benefit. The relationship is the hard shell that we build around the meaty nut that protects the meaty nut. When you think about like, gazelles on the African savannah bowing their heads to drink from the water, when you watch a herd of herbivores like that, there's always one with its head up. It's
Mhm.
instinctive. So a relationship has to function that way. There has to be a protection. Those are the agreements in the relationship. So, for example, I love you to death. I love what kind of a father you are when you're present. You're an interesting person to me, but we don't have agreement on the place of other people in our relationship, sex with other people, the presence of pornography, addiction, whatever that is. So you may feel okay about that. I don't. That makes it unsafe for me to pursue that meeting up for you to with you to open up and let our relationship happen around me and for me to be a part of it. So I would say um the definition of a relationship isn't do I like you? The definition of relationship is are we both bought in to protecting and preserving what is so likable and so special about this? Because it doesn't come easy. You can see examples of this all over the place in otherwise, normal, healthy relationships. I would say some of the most raw aspects of me largely come out in my family setting.
Mhm.
I think that's how it is for a lot of
Mhm.
people. Now, I don't just walk around and let that fall out. And if I do, it comes with really fast apology and repair because I know that I can't just do whatever I feel or treat people however I want to and have a relationship work. So there's agreement, there's that shell that protects the vulnerable thing. And if addiction and infidelity is a no go for you, and your partner ultimately does not agree with that to the point where they don't do it, then there's probably not a relationship there that is going to work for you, at least not an intimate primary relationship. You may be able to be fantastic co parents. And if that's the case, what a blessing to your kids.
Yeah, and I was thinking on lots of different webinars, we talk about feelings are not facts. So I feel like I love you, and I'm again not minimizing any of this, but I love the aspect of really looking at that. So I just put in the chat. We did a series on should I stay or should I go, and it's there's zero judgment. Nobody's getting pressured to do anything. It's just data. I say it all the time. You fill out the 10 questions. That's good data for you to to consider. So I think that can be helpful at coming back to a 10,000 feet. I think no, I know love is an action word. Love isn't just about the gooey feeling. Love, I like you were using like a walnut as an example of like, oh, there's a, but it, like we do, you know, there are moments in the best of relationships where you're not feeling the little love, feelings. But you're so committed to this person in this relationship that you're willing to do like you're talking about with that couple. I'm not feeling great about getting rid of stuff and I'm feeling like I can't stand this stuff. And we're going like, but we're in this and we're going to work through this, but I bet they're not feeling warm and fuzzy and, love eyes, in the moment when that's happening. So to me, it's the action is I'm willing to work towards you with that. So, and again, like if this is working for both of you, then it's working for both of you. I do appreciate that your children are benefiting from co-parenting in a non-hostile way. That's huge, So, yeah, and it's your life and your situation. What's going to work for you, for the long haul. So, okay. The next one is a three-parter. After 5 years of trying to rebuild post discovery and my partner crossing my bottom line to stop working a recovery program and not telling me for almost a year, we are formalizing separation. I shared this 3 weeks ago, and his treatment of me feels like a discard. We are still living together, and he thinks the home we built to raise our family is he is entitled to. Financially, cannot move out until the house sells. I prefer us to move on completely from the unsuccessfully rebuilt. He is no responsive in delaying things and saying he's not emotionally ready yet. Same pattern of not being ready to do the things to rebuild and repair and still not ready to face the consequences of his non-action for 5 years. Not even the decency to wish me a nice trip with friends. I'm not surprised, but how do I cope with the next few months of his victimhood? I am able to see this as data and confirmatory of my decision. And a lot of ways I'm thankful for the clarity it provides each time he shows me who he is.
Yeah, I would say this. It sounds like you have a plan, and that's good. Um, the coping with the victimhood, you know, whether a relationship is going to stay together and converge or not, I think one of the biggest sources of guilt for us, like appropriate guilt for us, is if we're not fair. Now, in this, fairness is not we weigh equally what both sides want. Fairness is like, for example, as you're describing here, I want out. I don't want to do this with you anymore, and I have reasons why. You've done good work up to this point. I've talked a lot in the past about how the partner who's betrayed you have to set terms for continuance, and if you don't, you can't make sense of what comes next in your addicted partner's life and recovery. So really good background on this. The thing I'd have you look at how to cope with the victimhood is keep working your plan, know what your rights are, and also look from an integrity standpoint. Am I being fair with this person? Meaning, am I openly communicating what is going on with the sale of the house? Am I giving heads up for when there's showings? And fairness in a relationship is not really I'll be fair if you'll be fair. That's immature. Fairness is I will be fair because it's the right thing to do. If you want to grow up and get fair as well, you are welcome to. If you don't, remember, fairness goes both ways, and I'm looking out for mine too. It's not fair for you to hold me hostage, and I'm not going to let you. So I would say that's probably the biggest place to look to cope with the victimhood. I would also say, to a degree, it's going to be hard to move on into the new life you want while you're still living in the same house. I would look for as many ways as possible to keep plotting your own course, and living that life that you've been working hard to give yourself access to. And really work to understand, like, what are the pieces that hold me back from that in reality, versus it would be easier if that makes sense. But this is a tough position, and I've unfortunately I've seen this happen a lot through the years as well. um, some people are not, I'd say, up to par with facing loss and letting go, and they have a knack for making a lot of people around them suffer for that. So in this too, I'll speak to the other side of the equation here. I don't know if they're listening or not, but if you're in this position where it scares you to death what your partner wants, again, I would think from that integrity standpoint. I've been so unfair with you with my betrayal and my immaturity. Maybe today I can start being fair with you, which is, if you're saying I don't want to do this and I want you to let me go, I can let you go and I can face the loss. Um, Again, from our first question asker, um, family life is not necessarily over because you're separated. In fact, it might be a better one. I've worked with plenty of couples who have said our marriage ruined our friendship, and there's still hope for a relationship if you are willing to actually see your other for who they are and what they want, and not try to keep them close just so things don't feel bad for you.
Yeah, and I was looking at the he is delaying things and saying he's not emotionally ready yet, and obviously a lot of stall tactics and not taking responsibility that his actions, like you looked at the data and, you're going like these actions are, crossing the bottom line and this is the results of the action. And it's challenging. It's challenging for an addict to, take responsibility, especially one that's not, it doesn't sound like really working any kind of recovery program. So, then there isn't like this in between where I'm not really acting out and I'm really in recovery. It's like active addiction or active recovery or on the path towards it. So this feels like somebody who's leaning all into all of the negative qualities of active addiction. And I'm sorry for you, but I also hear you're empowered to go. I'm looking at the data. I've got a plan. I it's a few months. It will feel challenging, but hey, we talk about this in addiction all the time. It's one day at a time. What do you need to do today to stay grounded? What do you need to do to stay regulated? What do you need to do to get some joy in your life? So whatever you can do to just go, I just have to get through today. And then tomorrow, I just need to get through today. It's sometimes breaking it down like that can be helpful because it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, it's like forever. So, okay. The next one is a person in recovery who has worked to become more emotionally present. My data now shows a clear empathy gap. My wife is highly empathetic to the family system, but remains dismissive or unable to attune to my pain regarding her past betrayal. Can our relationship achieve mature functioning if she is pro social in her roles as a parent, but remains avoidant or unable to co regulate my pain?
Um, so this is a good example of, I think, the tendency we have to find the data we want, even though it may not apply to us. So at the end of the day, whatever you need or want a partner to be, and this is for addicts and this is for their betrayed partners too. Um, you get to ask for that. You get to want that. Whether or not your partner wants to, whether or not it actually is fair for them or feels good for them, or it's what they're interested in, that's a separate matter. So I would say the crux of this is, if you want a partner who is more emotionally present and you need that partner to show up more in your pain, there will be no compensation for that, no matter how empathic they may be to your children or your extended family. If you aren't feeling it coming to you in the way that you want, there's no substitute for that. Now, with that, part of the secure functioning is not holding on and making compromises in secret. So if it's really a deal breaker for you, if it's really I can't keep going with this, you have to activate yourself in those terms. And you have to be prepared to do something about it. And I'm not talking about in terms of like twisting consequences. I'm talking about in terms of boundary. I'm learning a lot more from social media than I'm proud to say right now. The other day, I saw this image on Facebook that said, "Boundaries are where I can love myself and you at the same time." Um, and I think that's a good look at this. So, um, if there's a part of you that says, "I don't feel good about being in a relationship with someone who hurt me and cannot acknowledge it to a degree that makes me feel like they have it, they get it, or it matters to them." Um, I think there's a boundary problem for you. There's a decision that has to be made, and not necessarily a do we stay together or not. It may be a decision about proximity. It may be a decision about what our relationship is going to consist of. Again, from our first question, I may love you as a co-parent, and you might be not a great partner for me. So, um, yeah, the short answer is no, you're not going to get secure functioning if both partners can't activate themselves for what they want, spell it out clearly, and give each other a clear answer and a clear commitment. So, if dumb example, if I'm saying to my spouse, "Hey, this isn't going to feel like a fulfilling relationship unless we have a goal to have a house on the lake in 10 years, we just have to have it," or "this isn't what I want." That's a very clear, "I want you on board. I want this to happen." And if my partner can't give a clear yes or no to that, either no, that's not where I want to put our assets. I don't want a house on the lake. In fact, I hate the lake. Or that sounds great to me. I love that timeline. Let's do it. So without activation, activation begats activation. So I would say to the person asking this question, um, check your ask. How clear is it? And are you prepared to do something about it? Are you prepared to have a boundary where you can continue to love yourself and this other person at the same time? And where does that put you? Because there's no making up for it. Good dads, good moms don't always make good partners. It's not the same thing. And a good partner is someone who is interested in giving what you want, what you need, and meeting you there, and that being reciprocal in a relationship. We're interested fundamentally in each other.
So I have a question for you. Check your ask, because I'm going like it'd be really easy to go, well, I see you doing it for everyone else, not for me. I could sound whiny with that. So
Yeah.
how do you have an ask, or how do you take this to your couples therapist and say
Yep.
this is the gap?
I saw this in a couple session earlier this week.
There you go.
There's been a disclosure, an update to a disclosure that has been dragging its feet for months. And she came in and she said, "We have an appointment on March 30th. I think that's reasonable. I think you can be ready for that. I'll have my questions in. You need to work with your therapist, and we do this on March 30th." And he says, "Okay." In the past, the way that this couple had been navigating that is she would say things like, "Well, I haven't even gotten a disclosure yet. I hear that you're here getting honest with your group, but you're not getting honest with me." So to your point, Tammy, like you can see the indirect versus the direct. So part of differentiation and part of secure functioning in a coupleship is I don't have to plead my case or even justify what I want. And we're not talking like narcissism, like because I want it, I should get it. It's I know myself, I know where that's coming from. And the ask isn't immediately followed with the data to twist your arm that you should give it to me. Well, you do it for everybody else. It's, "Hey, I would like to feel more connected to you heart to heart. I would like you to join me in my pain because it's been very, very lonely there. And I don't feel good about moving on until I know that this is not a taboo topic between the two of us. I need you to step up and step in." Does that clarify some?
That helps a lot. Yeah, because I was like, well, check your ask. I'm like, well, I could come up with a really not good I'm gonna whine about it. You do it for everybody else. And it has to be hard to go, well, it's not a lack of capacity for the other person. It's just within our relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this one, sorry, I missed what you said about personality disorders in relation to this topic and related to addiction. I am the betrayed, very affected by this. There is denial, deflecting, and defensiveness, etc. And is there hope and awareness and working the steps without honest therapy to get the core issues that have nothing to do with me?
I mean, the short answer is like no, and I would replace honest therapy with like real reflection, which real reflection about a person does not come from looking in the mirror. Again, remember we have our biases. So you run into this all the time. If you're anything like me, you may have enough like body image insecurity that when somebody says you're really handsome, you would say, "Oh, you can't mean that about me." Because when I look in the mirror, that's what I see, something that's not that. So real self-reflection actually comes with letting another person in deeply and intimately. That's what therapy is about. Therapy is not about fixing problems. Therapy is about learning how to be in relationship with people and to do that over time. So I would say it's a recipe for disaster. And I've worked with plenty of people who have insisted on their own version of going it alone or I'll do this my way, only to be confronted down the road and in the long run, like almost 100% of the time, as I'm recognizing that doesn't work. I have to move in closer with other people. I have to let other people in, or I'm not going to solve this. So, and often I have never been able to make a good case for that. I have been able to scaffold people who have hit rock bottom and say, "Do you think it's time to consider this? So you've been doing this for a long time. Let's look at what's not working and why it's not working." Unfortunately, if denial and defensiveness can be a strong thing, and it's built to insulate us from pain. So our willingness to stop running from the pain has a lot to do with whether or not we're going to buckle down and do what works, or just keep reinventing the wheel and buying a few months at a time.
And I'm looking for it because we had a really good webinar on oh, here it is, on personality disorders and SA. And what you're talking about, and I know this is a little short snippet, but denial, deflecting, and defensiveness is part and parcel with any form of addiction. Like, of course, we have to be self-focused, self-centered in order to continue to act out, and not give up our, our acting out behavior. So personality disorders that, those are diagnosable, et cetera, et cetera. So but I'm with John that, and I don't know how early this is in discovery, for this, but, I did put for you, partner. The Healthy Boundaries work group is starting next month. Debbie McCrae does a great job of helping you have internal boundaries as well as, across, physical, emotional, financial, spiritual. What do you need to be okay, regardless of what that person's doing or not doing? Because, as you have seen already with the questions, it unfortunately with addiction, until and unless, the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, we continue on, and and there can be really negative consequences like losing the relationship, but not everybody chooses that, but that does not mean you have to go down with the ship. So okay, so the next one, been married for 15 years, 5 D days between 2017 and 2025. His behaviors were sexual affairs, escalated porn use, visiting prostitutes, etc., emotional, yeah, lots of stuff. And so he's done therapy for 2 months, but not with a CSAT that ended due to insurance. Can you explain when a sex addict stops the physical acting out, but then unconsciously leans into validation seeking micro connections? Oh goodness, we could do a whole webinar on, you know,
We could.
the abstinence, but not any
I'll
kind of recovery. Yeah.
I'll talk
Oh,
I'll talk I'll talk neurologically about this. So detox, notoriously in any kind of addiction treatment, detox is a bear, and it has to be like confronted head on. It has to be bulls by the horn. There can be step down stuff. So like alcohol detox, you never ever want to do that on your own, because it can kill you.
right.
But there's pain, there's sweatiness, there's sleeplessness. Like there's no way around it. Stopping, hard stop in the brain is neurologically painful. A silly example of this. So here in Utah, the land of non-alcohol and largely
Generally.
non-coffee drinkers, we have what they call dirty soda shops. So it's soda, and you can add a truckload more sugar and flavoring to make your
Oh, there
soda
you
more
go.
tasty. And I was
Yeah.
talking, I was
There's no
talking with
problem with that.
no, not at all. I was talking with this client the other day. He's several years sober. He and his wife started this ritual of daily, like one of the places is called Swig. This is not an endorsement of them, but just so you understand what he's saying, he said, we get a swig every day. He said, when I'm working from home, it's the only thing that gets me out of the home. He did say, I don't like how my body is feeling. And I think 24 ounces of soda a day is probably one of the big culprits. So we were talking about, he's like, I want to stop. I don't know if my spouse does, and I don't care if she does. She can do what she wants to do. But he said, I want to stop. But he said, I actually think I'm going to have a hard time just going cold turkey. And so we were exploring like what do you like about it? And he said it's kind of this like get out ritual. It's a connecting ritual for us. And he did say he said they do ice water with lemon, and he said I actually really like that. And he said I'd even be willing to pay the $3 or whatever for that because I still get the connection ritual and I still get out. That's a really good example of the neural pathways still exist. And it's not a matter of like, I just can't fill it with sex, or I just can't fill it with soda. Anything else matters. There has to be a really intentional, if I stop acting out comes from a baseline legitimate need. And as you're putting it here, like validation, connection, every human being on the planet needs that. However, how we get it matters a ton for our own peace of mind, for the stability and safety in our relationships. So, yeah, 2 months where you may arrest the most damaging parts of your sexual acting out does not repair that neural pathway at all. And there is plenty of room. Think about it as a vacuum. Stopping hurts. It creates a vacuum. Your brain still needs to get that need met. And it takes a long time, I think, to unwind, de-roll, and to learn healthy ways to get that need met. So I see this all the time. I've stopped my acting out, but I still flirt. I'm still looking for those micro connections. It's getting enough of a bump so I don't have to face the pain of withdrawal.
Abstinence is not recovery. I put a bunch of things in the chat. Check them out. Or email TAMI at Seeking Integrity. Last question. We have little time. I'm the betrayer here, 4+ years in. I'm struggling with overcoming my personality traits. I hate the narratives about personality disorders and how they are monsters, untreatable, etc. It is true that so much of the traits I have are entrenched and I can't trust my own thinking so much of the time. Is there hope for recovery for someone diagnosed with personality disorder and sex addiction? Yes. Check out the webinar I just put in there a little bit ago. Have you seen real recovery, restored relationships, et cetera, occur?
Yes, yes. And I would say the biggest factor in that is working with a good sponsor long term. You keep working the steps, not because that's treatment for personality disorder, but that's a good relationship and deep relationship focused, neurobiological, attuned therapy with your therapist. In essence, for letting a real relationship form there, not that you're best friends and you go to movies together, but where you can talk about what it feels like to be in a relationship with each other. There is hope and there is healing. And I love, even as you're talking about here, like I hate what this does to me. And I have to think this is really entrenched. I have to be careful and pick my path forward. That's the recipe for healing from this. It also takes a lot of time. There's not a technique and there's not a trick to it. It's day in and day out, that commitment to introspection, even though that hurts, inviting in confrontation and challenge of that which might come naturally, but is ultimately destructive.
Gotta go. Another meeting. Thank you, John. Bye,
See ya.
everyone.